This week on Worldview, as the year winds down, New Delhi has literally sped up its diplomacy with the United States as both Jaishankar and Foreign Secretary Misri made a dash to Washington, D.C. In 2025, how should India prepare for Trump shocks on trade, tariff, and other areas? We have a special interview up ahead with Trump's last envoy to India, Kenneth Juster. Hello and welcome to Worldview. This is the last Worldview of the year at the Hindu with me, Suhasini Heather. Now, it's been about 8 weeks since the United States elected Donald Trump as the next president, and he would be sworn in for at least another 3 weeks on January 20th, but it does feel like Mr. Trump is already in the saddle. He's hit the floor running with a number of his decisions announced to begin with, most importantly, his nominees for nearly all the top posts. This is far ahead of his last election win in 2016, which took months. This time, we really know his appointees for US Secretary of State, Defense Secretary, National Intelligence, NSA, and all the rest. Now, although he's been tough on China and picked nominees who will be tough on China, Trump has actually already reached out to Chinese President Xi Jinping to invite him for his inaugural. He's made it clear that he has plans to raise tariffs on almost all trading partners, including India.
If somebody charges us, India, we don't have to talk about own. If India charges us 100%, do we charge them nothing for the same? They send in a bicycle and we send them a bicycle. They charge us 100 and 200. India charges a lot. Brazil charges a lot. If they want to charge us, that's fine, but we're going to charge them the same thing.
And he's expected to begin deportations and immigration crackdowns almost immediately after taking charge. Finally, Trump will further weaken the United Nations, the multilateral system. He plans to walk out of the World Health Organization, according to his transition team, as early as possible in his tenure. So this week, it was unusual for its timing, but both External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar and Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri traveled to Washington. This is unusual because this is the last week of the year. The period between Christmas and New Year's Day is really a holiday across the US capital. So just what or who took them there? To begin with, the Ministry of External Affairs said Dr. Jaishankar would meet counterparts during the visit to discuss key bilateral, regional and global issues. Foreign Secretary Misri was already there for Foreign Office consultations, as well as farewells to State Department officials who will leave now. Jaishankar actually met with National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. You can see him in his holiday gear there. Sullivan is expected to visit India before demitting office in early January. However, they're also there to speak to Trump transition team officials about plans for the next year, particularly India's turn to host the Quad Summit likely to happen later in 2025 when Mr. Trump will come to India. In addition, speculation that there are talks on about an invitation to Prime Minister Modi for the Trump inauguration, and possibly an attempt to get ahead on some of the trouble spots in ties, the tariff questions, the Department of Justice indictments in the Panun case, as well as against the Adani Group. Earlier, I spoke to someone who had the closest view of the India-US relationship in Trump's first tenure, former ambassador to India, Kenneth Juster. He spoke to Worldview, and I began by asking him really about his broad outlook for Trump 2.0 and India.
Well, I think there's going to be a very strong U.S.-Indian relationship during the second term of the Trump presidency, and I base that on what happened during the first term. U.S.-India relations were among the highlights of his foreign policy tenure. I think the appointees, by and large, will be furthering the strength of the U.S.-India relationship that we saw in the first term of the Trump administration. In addition, these advisors see China as the major strategic challenge that the United States faces. And in that sense, I think there's a certain strategic clarity between the United States and India as to what some of the, challenges will be in the Indo-Pacific region. So that will further enhance the relationship overall.
Of course, that sounds great, but what about the tough areas, trade, Trump's shock therapy? Remember, he withdrew India's GSP status.
The president has been clear that he believes India should lower tariffs and is too protectionist, and he bases this on both the levels of tariffs, which the real tariff level in India is high, and the trade deficit that exists between the United States and India. And he had this opinion during the first term. I don't think it's correct to say that the GSP issue was shock therapy. We have to remember that part of the effort in putting tariffs on a country is to try to get a negotiation to increase market access for the United States. So the president has indicated that he will slap tariffs of 10 to 20% on most countries around the world, and I think that would probably include India. But I also think that could be the beginning of a negotiation to open markets a bit, and from India's perspective, to try to lock down the benefits of its largest trade partner, the United States, in both goods and services. And one should think expansively in terms of what other issues of concern, whether it be in technology, in energy, elsewhere, that the two sides could do some horse trading and reach a broader trade and economic agreement.
Remember, in 2016, Trump also insisted India should zero out all its oil imports from Iran. Would that kind of strong-arming tactics continue?
I don't think we strong-armed India on trade because we never changed the situation. So it was a negotiation that was unable to be concluded. Yes, you are correct on Iran. The Trump administration had a maximum pressure campaign, which I think may well get reinstituted in this next term. And India was treated like every other country, which said you needed to zero out oil imports from Iran, and India complied with that. I think on Russia, there's a understanding of the long historical relationship India has had. And in the previous term of the Trump administration, there were not ultimatums put on India with regard to Russia.
What now is the future impact of the Department of Justice's indictments in the Panun case as well as on Adani?
Well, when cases get into our Justice Department and into the legal process, as someone who is not part of that, you really don't want to comment on them, and they should probably not be affected by any concerns other than the legal considerations that are being followed by the prosecutors. Unfortunately, at times, folks in India can be very sensitive about legal matters, but I can tell you from my experience, this would not have been something that the State Department would have chose to push or not push. If anything, probably the diplomatic community would wish that these types of cases did not exist. But they get into our legal process, and we are very strict about not interfering with what the prosecutors do.
And finally, the question everyone's been asking, would President Trump invite Prime Minister Modi to his inaugural?
It's not normally been the tradition to have foreign leaders come to an inauguration. Instead, it's been representatives, ambassadors in Washington who attend. I don't know what the thinking is within the administration. I know what you've read in the papers as well, but I have not yet heard anything one way or the other in terms of an invitation to Prime Minister Modi.
All right.
But I would emphasize again that the two leaders have a very good relationship. President Trump felt his trip to India in February 2020 was an excellent one, and I think that personal relationship will be important going forward.
Both an insightful as well as an interesting take on what the next 4 years could bring. So what's Worldview's take? A Trump administration really promises to bring more chaos into an already unsettled world with conflicts in Ukraine, Gaza, West Asia, Africa, and others, and a multilateral system really in shambles. For India, this will be one more variable to deal with in its foreign policy, and despite the bilateral and personal bonhomie, it will be necessary to change or shift India's outlook on ties with the US to an even more transactional one, at least for the next 4 years. I don't have any reading recommendations this week as we're closing the season of Worldview, but I would like to add a note in memoriam for former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. He passed away this week, and Dr. Singh really left a lasting imprint on Indian foreign policy forever. My piece is online at www.hindu.com on that. Now, we'd like to thank you all for joining us each week this year, and we'll return with a new season of the show in 2025. From the team, all the best for the holiday season and a very happy new year.